Okay, so I pushed out a release. I'd hoped to push out about 2 releases a week, and right now I'm thinking one is going to be all I want to shoot for. So anyway, I've did a release, and with each release, I want to shoot a little video. Another reason I'm going to only do these once a week. So let's go to the release notes. It didn't look like much here, but I've been doing a lot of other things, but there are some important changes. So we'll just go through them. As far as the alerting package, I added alert types show, and I'll show you this feature in a minute. This was all so that I could basically I added config show config, and then alert types show just calls config show config with the alert types, and then contacts group shows calls config show config with contact groups, because all these objects are what are called configuration objects. And configuration objects are really cool because you can just create a folder in the config directory, and then you can start adding files that essentially represent objects, or you can add a config file and then you can interact with that through this config package right here in your code. So if you ever want to get into developing modules for something, I do recommend you get in touch with me, let me know what you're working on, and I can start helping you get headed in the right direction. So with the Arc package, which is kind of like the main ArcShell package, mostly I worked on the menu, and you're going to see that in a minute. In fact, let me just go ahead and show you that. So let's go here. Oh no, I'm going to have to log in here, aren't I? Just a second. We'll let that get started up in the background. I'll go back to this. So I added keyword show. Again, it's just calling config show config with keywords, and it's just all so that I could add this to the menu, so that once you've got the product installed, there's some things you can do to get all this configuration done, but you really don't need to do that. Made some changes to the counters in the logging package, in the minor refactoring in the counters package, in the messaging package. This is where most of the code was changed. Most of it was just some refactoring, some bug fixes as I was testing some of the queuing features, and they weren't working, and I realized why. I fixed that. And added cleanup for orphaned queues, because queues map to contact groups. So if you create a contact group, the messages get routed to the contact group, and then you delete the contact group, and the messages have never been delivered. You have this queue of messages out there. So it just wipes them out. Hopefully you're not changing contact groups anywhere where you care about the messages. Added modified error handling in SendGrid. And in general, I made some changes to error handling across the board as I saw a better pattern emerging. I have a logging function that you can log an error, and you can do pass in -2, which then also returns it to standard error. And so some of the places where I had these custom error handlers in each package, I've kind of just got rid of that custom handler altogether and gone to log error. Now we're getting the error logged, plus we're getting it returned to standard error. So it's doing killing 2 birds with 1 stone, as they say. And then on the config package, okay, so I had this administrator email and text address, got rid of that entirely because it required you to set that up. I want the setup to go faster, smoother, easier. And so now that's part of the install. I'll show you that. And this is going to simplify the time basically to get it installed and then actually do something with the product. I feel like I've been spending too much time kind of showing people to install it, configure it, and then you have to learn how to deploy it from one node to another, then synchronize that node to another node. And then if you can't get direct access to that node, how do you package the local copy and deliver it to the node and run an update? And there's a lot. It's really cool that you can do all those things, but it makes, I think, people feel like, wow, it's all set up. And it's not. But those are important things you need to know in order to use this package. So let's see if we can pull up a terminal here. Thankfully that came up fairly fast. We're going to source in ArcShell. And so the first thing I want to show you is the Arc menu. So after you have ArcShell installed, you can pull up Arc menu just by typing that. And so we have the help, just give you an idea of the various modules and helps. All the commands there, you can type from the command line, they work. You can start and stop the daemon, kill it, restart it, get the status, and skip 3 because that's the main one I'm going to talk about. We can run ArcShell setup. It just runs, it's meant to rerun setup. We're not going to run it again, but if we want to rerun setup because we made configuration changes, that's the way to do it. We can edit the ArcShell global config file because this is a common task you're going to want to do. So it's right there, but you can also do that from this configuration object details menu. And so let's look at this because this is something you're really going to want to understand. So, okay. So these are all the configuration objects, and yeah, they all are. So what these are folders. They're just folders in a config file. And if you put a folder in here, this is going to show, your object will show up here just like this object does, or it should. Anyway, so let's look at, let's say we wanted to, well, let's just say we wanted to look in the ArcShell folder. Okay. And so actually what it does is run show on that. And so it runs this generic show, which basically looks at the files and cats all the files in the folder. And so there's only one. It's called ArcShell config. And you can see I've got this super secret API that you're not supposed to see. So I will have to black that out. But we'll take care of that. And this is the Dropbox link that I use, and maybe you use. I'll probably black that out too, but that's on my download URL. So those are the files. I can edit that file from that first menu, or I can just open it. You'll see, okay, then it runs config list objects all. And so you see there's these 3 directories, the delivered directory, the ArcShell global home, which is just a subdirectory in here. It's the Arc subdirectory in here. So global home lives within home. When we want to distribute ArcShell, we package up the home, which includes the global home, includes your settings, and then we push that out to other nodes. And then our local home is right here, and you can see there's no file. So we have 2 config files. We have a delivered one and our global one, and this is our global one. So if we wanted to, we could just edit that file, and that's how we would, so I could just kill the menu right here, edit the file, and that's how I edit that object. So let's let's look at like keywords. Okay, so if I go to keywords, it's going to do that show again. And what it's doing is showing you all the keywords. So it's got all these files in this directory, critical, email, log. These are the keywords, and these are the settings. Send text, 1, send email. It means for a critical keyword, we're going to send a text and an email. And so you can configure these, okay? You would not want to configure the delivered one, though. You'd want to configure a global copy or a user home. And so let's say I wanted to change critical, right? Let's just quit the menu, and we're going to copy the critical file. Okay, we're going to copy that critical file to our global home. And then I'm going to open it in VI. Okay, and I could change that. I could change that to 0. I could also use a cron expression here, so I could say it only sends texts, you know, between the hours of 8 and 8 o'clock, all days of the week. And so that's going to return true. Those hours, it'll send a text if that keyword is implemented in one of the other calls. And otherwise, it will not send a text. So, and I could also, cool thing about this is we could use if, some condition, obviously that's not valid, but you get what I mean. You see what I mean? Else. So you can basically write code to, have different values in this file. Now, a lot of the config files are like that. You want to make sure that you know whether they are or not. I'll just say we're not going to send text. So what happens now if I run that menu again? I can't remember what the command is, so let's look at it again and watch what happens. So So go to configuration object details. We're going to look at keywords. And remember, before the critical would send a text. But see, now it's set to 0. And why is it doing that? Because yes, it sees this file, but it also sees this file. And so this is the file, in this case, this is the file that's going to get loaded on this particular, on your global home. So now when I sync this out to all of the other nodes, this is the file that's getting operated on, not the delivered file. If I want to get rid of that, I just RM it. And now I'm back to using the delivered setting. And so that's true with like alert types and other things. You kind of have to know how each one of these things works, but you know, that's basically, not all config files are the same, and I'll go through each one of these objects in detail at some point. But that's where I spent the bulk of the menu work anyway. So okay, so menu is cool. Oh, and let me just show you setup. So now when you do setup, okay, let's say, you know, ArcShell was not installed. Well, let's look at my in $home, our .arcshell file. You'll see there's this new variable, ArcAdmin emails, and that is set during install, and it's recommended that you set that. You only have to set it once, but if you want email to work, and assuming your server does run email, $. So what we do is we just do ArcShell setup. Well, let me do -help. And you can see there's this admin option now, and that's where you set that. So I would just say admin, and I want to set it to post.ethan@gmail.com, and it runs setup. So the first time you run setup on a box, you set that. From that point on, that's going to get distributed to all your other nodes. It will pick that up when you do the install on another node, assuming you use arc deploy. There are other ways to do installs, and again, that's something I'll talk about later. But if you haven't set that, all you have to do is open that ArcShell file and set it, and it's set. And actually, it should have picked up the new value. So there's a slight bug fix. You know, it's good that I only found one bug. I've been recording 15 minutes, and one bug's not bad. So it didn't override those values. It should have overrode the value with the new value. So I'll look at the setup script there and fix that. Okay, so that's important, because at this point, you know, if mail works on this server, then I should just be able to do, you know, echo foo send message now, and it should send a message. In fact, I can do log follow, and you can see that you know, it at least logged that it was going to send a message. And I believe I've got this configured, as you saw, to use SendGrid right now. So should be using SendGrid, and I should be getting emails, but I don't have any way to check it right now. So that's one thing we want to do, is make sure we have email capability. Right now, MailX, Mail, if you've got those configured, if you set up postfix or something like that on your servers. If not, you can use SendGrid. I looked at, I forgot another service. It would be pretty easy to configure. But we want to have email capabilities. And another thing that ArcShell will eventually be able to do, especially if someone actually needs it, I don't actually need it, but it's not too hard to do, is because it's kind of modular. You're just replicating the nodes. You can actually have nodes, you know, rsync back their messages to the main node. So maybe only one node has outbound email capability. You can have all those other nodes send their messages back to that node, and it will send them out for you, just like they originated from that node, as opposed to coming from the other node. So that's pretty easy to set up with a system like this, because it's a cohesive framework. Okay, so that is all I've got for this release. Hopefully, again, I'll be pushing out about one release a week. Please follow me on Twitter. I do post a lot of kind of code examples and things like that. It's a great place to learn more about ArcShell. On LinkedIn, not so much, but you know, I do post a lot of information on LinkedIn, so follow me there if you want. And then I did post some videos on the ArcLogic Software YouTube channel this week about my setup, about using Sublime and Ubuntu and things like that. And I've still got more videos to shoot for that. So that was something else I was working on. All right. Well, this is all I've got for now, and sorry I went so long, and hopefully I can make them shorter someday. All right, thanks for listening and watching.